Hello, and welcome to the Ascendant Art Podcast, where we are on a search for art ascending above the mainstream. This is Mike, your host, here with Vinny from Little Chad and Joey with the Keeper's Cairn books, and with a guest tonight, the man from Telepathic Bunny Comics. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, I am fine. How are you?
Nice. It's going to be a good night. It's going to be a fun night because tonight we are talking about comedy. And I know I had met you not long ago in which you had given me some great advice about how to do the comedy in comics and how to have different people interact with each other. And my understanding, of course, is that you have a couple of books as well. Tell me about some of the stuff you're making.
Right now, my primary comic, I have a universe called Community Service, and right now I have a comic book in production, and I have several scripts that I've scripted enough for another book, and I also have short stories that I'm eventually going to put on a website to establish the world in people's minds before my book even comes out. But that's in the work. I also do a live write stream every day at 3:00, so 5 days a week.
I was going to say, I think I've ended up on one of those once.
Yes, you did. You did. On comedy, as a matter of fact.
Yes, indeed.
Is that where's that stream at? Is that on YouTube? Is that on
That's
Periscope?
on YouTube so far till I find a better platform. But YouTube, definitely.
And what's
I'm
the name?
I'm a little ticked off at YouTube right now. They
who isn't?
They gacked my live stream the other night. I was watching a movie with my Genesis crew mates, my think tank that I'm part of. A 1984 movie that is free on YouTube, and they gacked me over copyright. Not making a cent off of it. I'm not even monetized, but they gacked me over. Buckaroo Banzai.
And the adventures through the eighth dimension.
Yeah, through the eighth dimension. Yeah, and we were just watching it, and we were like commenting over it. So we were doing transformative, and they gacked me after like 15 minutes. And
Did you get a copyright strike on that too to shut down streaming for a while?
They shut down the stream, man. They didn't shut me down, but they killed the stream.
So
I didn't want you to find out what the watermelon was for.
I guess they did not.
I'm going to say that that's one of the advantages on Twitch, right? Because Amazon owns Twitch, so they let you, if it's an Amazon Prime movie, you can do watch parties.
Oh.
Where people, if it's a Prime movie, you log in as long as they got Prime too. You can all watch it together right on Twitch, and it's perfectly allowed. It's one of the things they use to get more people streaming on Twitch. You'd think YouTube would be aware and want to, if it's a free movie on YouTube, why wouldn't they do the same thing?
Well, they're not making any money off of it, so it doesn't make sense that they would. My guess is that I was too small. Since I'm not monetizing or no commercials on my stream, then i.e. they're not making any money off of it. So that's why they wouldn't let me do it.
Yep. Well, those cases
if
of
I was
digging
monetized, they might have. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely one of those cases of digging in and seeing like what guy in what office said, this would be a great idea. Now, although speaking of things like that, so you mentioned Genesis Crew. Tell us a little bit about Genesis Crew.
Genesis Crew is this loose affiliation. We call it a think tank because we are just a bunch of first-time creators who have kind of gathered together in this Twitter group to just we like promote each other. We go on each other's shows. We share like knowledge with each other. We give each other advice. Like I consult on their scripts. They look at mine. We're just basically trying to kind of like offer support to each other. So our motto is start something. So. Whether it's good or bad, it's start something,
Dude, that makes sense because we've got our own little Ascendant Art circle where we do the same thing, where we kind of like rip on each other's writings and and artwork from time to time, and I think that also kind of gets into one thing we'll want to talk about as well. I guess we'll do this before the comedy, which is while everyone is complaining about how sideways a lot of the mainstream entertainment industry has gone, especially with us for mainstream comics, right? There was a time like everyone complained about it, but it does feel like we're moving into a new phase. And right, there's what we do here on Ascendant Art, but it sounds like you guys have a nice circle going too in that case.
Yeah. We basically we're all from different walks. We're all from different philosophies. We've got one guy was in the mainstream for 30 years, and Peter Palmiotti, and we've got other guys that are literally doing their first script, so it's just it was loosely affiliated our group, but we call it a think tank.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I know we like to use the phrase like ship at 80%, right? Like don't worry about, having to get something perfect before you try to get it out there, and because you're going to improve. I think as a comic book fan, I can go back and look at what, is considered, the Silver Age books, the thing that launched modern Marvel, modern DC, and the writing is okay. It's not exactly great, but you can see like when Stan Lee was pumping out all those books, but you can watch things improve. You can see when the writers who've had time to develop their skill set start getting in, and then a few years later you get the Gwen Stacy storyline, or you get some of those major impactful stories. A lot of people don't realize that some of those bigger storylines actually were a few years later. They weren't like, especially if you go back and read the first X-Men runs. I mean, the initial X-Men books are totally different. I think obviously Claremont gets a lot of credit from, revolutionizing X-Men in the 70s with the all new, all different run, where he introduced, Phoenix and the Shi'ar and all that really good stuff that a lot of our generation memorizes from the X-Men cartoon from the early 90s, where pretty much that entire stuff is Claremont. That's all his stuff, with some touches of the Jim Lee art style from that era. But I think comic books is a great place I think it's usually the cultural leader, not because they're trying, but because they're a leading indicator of where things are going to go. And, we see it in movies now. It's all the storylines from 20, 30 years ago. I think the indie movement in comic books and how successful independent creators are in I know there's I've talked about him before, your boy Zach on YouTube likes to call it like artisanal comics, which I think is a funny, good thing. And that's kind of what it is. Like, you've got a niche market, but you as an individual creator can be very successful that way.
Well, I call it boutique comics myself. I think it's a better word for it.
That's true. It's less bougie. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
That damn elitist.
Yeah. Well,
Richard Meyer, the elitist. That'll be
right. Well, yeah, I disagree with a lot Richard Meyer does. But
if you ever listen to any of his movie reviews, I can tell you a lot of things I would disagree with.
Oh, he has horrible taste in movies. 100%. Oh yeah. But the thing about the writing, the way the writing has the writing went is it took them a few years to figure out that kids are not stupid, and you see a point where people finally realized that older people were also reading the comics, and the older people were not necessarily buying the comics for their kids. Sometimes they were buying them for themselves. And then, and I think the first person I would accredit to really starting putting adult topics into his stuff was probably Jack Kirby. Because basically the thing that Stan Lee did by his Marvel method, which is basically him just saying, okay, this is what's going to happen, go, But Jack Kirby literally, he wrote those scripts and then he went with it. But, you see some things like the New Gods and things like that he did. I mean, the art's jaw dropping. Okay, it's Jack Kirby. I mean, the design and everything. But the topics that he was willing to go into, he was willing to take these thumbnail pairings that Stan Lee gave him and go in directions that were really interesting with it. But somewhere along the way, people figured out that kids are not the only people reading these things.
Yeah, it was around. It was definitely around the late 70s when you got like Kirby coming back, doing some of his Fourth World and stuff like. But I also think Steranko, when he came in and did that whole psychedelic vibe, really trying to change the game, especially with his Nick Fury. And when you get
the Comics Code Authority really destroyed a lot of the adult oriented comics. I mean, there was a thriving strata of comics that were available at one point before the Comics Code came in. You had horror comics. You had like romance comics. You had
Tales from the Crypt, and what was the a lot of the stuff that people think of just from like the 80s, where it was a movie or TV show.
But, Tales from the Crypt, Creep Show,
Tales from the Crypt.
But when you mention that now, you did make a point earlier that a lot of the things that are popular storylines now came around 20, 30 years ago. And a lot of these ideas start in comics, and you're right, there's kind of an economics to it, right? If you look at the cost to produce a comic versus a game versus a TV show versus any other medium, right? It's very inexpensive. So you're right, like in the indie world, it's like you have this like constant engine of discovery where people are trying stuff out until one of them takes off. And then that becomes, you're right, the culture of the next generation.
Right.
And yeah, as you know, my job is to just not know what's going on half the time, so I can just ask questions sometimes out of context like this. But
well, Mike, I'll tell you, there's a lot of stuff that you probably don't even realize were comic books, specifically like more independent-minded comic books that are in like a good example is like Road to Perdition, which was a Tom Hanks movie, right? That was about him as a Irish mob hitman. And that's a graphic novel. You wouldn't even think it because it's completely not comic booky. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which a lot of people just think started as a Saturday morning cartoon, but it was
you're right. That was a comic before it was a cartoon.
It was a majorly successful independent comic, which became the most
comic.
Yep, completely independent comic. Which became the most successful independent movie ever made because the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was made independently and ended up making like
films, I think, wasn't it?
I think they picked up the distribution. Yeah, I think more. I think it might have been New Line eventually. No, it was New Line picked it up as a distributor, but they were, they didn't own it. They just distributed it. It's kind of like 20th Century Fox distributed Star Wars after, But there's a lot of content that comes from comic books because as a medium, it can lend itself to whatever storyline you want to tell. You can do a Road to Perdition about that, or you can do a superhero classic American style. Like the Kirby stuff is very out of this world and not what they did to it in the Eternals movie, because that's an abomination of what Kirby did.
No.
And so anybody who's a normie listening, please do not hold that against Jack Kirby. If you want like some of the best Kirby style stuff, with Big Barda and a lot of the New Gods is a great stuff. Yeah. The Eternals is basically after he had done New Gods at DC. Jack Kirby had a habit of falling out badly with his employers. So he had left Marvel to go do New Gods and things like that at DC. It ended badly there. And so then he went back to Marvel and did Eternals, which was a ripoff of New Gods for Marvel.
But don't get it too twisted. Jack Kirby was one of the sweetest men that's ever walked.
Oh, no, it's because the way they did deals. Yeah.
He did not give any shits that he basically, he had a lot of personal beliefs and he did not bend on those personal beliefs. And when he was asked to compromise, he had an inability to do so. That's where his problems came in.
Now, one thing that everybody who's a comic artist now needs to remember about Jack Kirby is that he could hit a friggin' deadline. He was drawing, I don't know, at peak like 20, 30 books a month. Yeah. And then, then we have, and I mentioned his name earlier, Jim Lee, who's considered like the gold standard of the, modern comic book artist. He could never hit a deadline. The reason Wildstorm could never make money and he ended up having to sell it to DC is because he could never get a book out on time. I mean, the reason Todd McFarlane's the only guy who's really still doing well out of the original Image guys is because he knew early on he needed to farm it out, he needed to hire other people, and he needed to run it like a business and get the books on time.
Yep.
And that's why Spawn is on, the issue number it is, and everything else is, somewhere else or, sold to different people.
So that's kind of an interesting observation I made just with you two guys bouncing off of this. But comics are basically innovating because they're low risk. I mean, back when I was a kid, like, 80s, early 90s, like video games were that too, but the market has grown so expensive in video games.
Yes.
You're not seeing innovation in that industry anymore because they can't afford the risk.
I don't know what you're talking about. I love Call of Duty 75.
Yeah, or Battlefield 2024, or whatever the hell it was.
Well, you also see this in movies. There's very little innovation in movies anymore because it's all profit share. It's all, it's all they basically they go with the sure thing if they can. They very rarely like take risks anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, then again, look at like how much money did they just spend on Eternals and Shang-Chi and some of some of those.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but that's because they thought they had the formula. Like, they're just applying the formula again. There's nothing innovative about those movies. They've just swapped out the cast, and they're running the same lines, the same jokes, the same everything.
The thing that's wrong, though, is up till Endgame, they were using classic Marvel storylines. And now they skipped everything and went straight to Marvel now.
So here's where I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to see if Telepathic is going to join me in my assumption. Everybody tries to give Kevin Feige credit. If you want to know who really made the MCU successful, his name was Ike Perlmutter.
Yeah.
He was the guy who ran Marvel. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because when Kevin Feige tried to do stupid shit, Ike Perlmutter would say, no, we're making a Captain America movie. We're going to do it on a reasonable budget and people are going to love it. And Kevin Feige, because he does interviews now where he's like, I wanted to do Captain Marvel and I wanted to do all these other things and they wouldn't let me. And the reason why is because he was like, we're going to make the shit that sells tickets. We're going to make the stuff that makes money.
They had a whole entire committee that was riding herd on Kevin Feige and it all went by them.
Yeah,
before it went out the door.
Yeah, and it was Bob Iger who screwed it up because Bob. Yep. So what happened was it was Captain America: Civil War where this all happened. So DC Comics announces Batman v Superman, which is their nuke to try to take back the fandom for movies. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Feige uses that because they were going to do a Captain America 3. It was going to be another thing along the lines of Winter Soldier, a more Captain America kind of based movie. But when that happened, Kevin Feige tried to get approval to do Civil War, which was basically another Avengers movie, and it was going to triple the budget. And that's not how you did the solo movies at that time because they were going to make money, and that's how it worked. Ike Perlmutter said, no, you're going to just do your regular stuff. The Avengers movies is where we do things. We don't do this kind of stuff. Kevin Feige jumped, like talking to military stuff, he jumped the chain of command and went to Alan Horn and Bob Iger and said, this guy over at Marvel is keeping me from doing the things I need to do it. And Bob Iger spent like a drunken sailor, and that's how he solved every problem at Disney. So he said, I'm going to take the Marvel movies and move it into its own division under Alan Horn instead of being part of Marvel proper. And now
Marvel Studios.
Yep. And now Kevin Feige gets to get whatever budget he wants to do whatever movie he wants. And it worked all right for about 3 movies while he had the Russo brothers reining him in.
Yeah.
And then as soon as the Russo brothers were done telling the story they wanted, and it's just come out now, Kevin Feige apparently wanted to kill off all the original Avengers. He wanted Captain America dead. He wanted Thor dead, and Iron Man dead. And he was gonna like that MCU moment when the A-Team, which is what the female of A-Force was, teaming up in Endgame. That was supposed to be the like launching point for Phase 4 with all those characters being the leads. And thank God that the Russos had enough control that they put in the part where Thanos headbutted, or punched,
where he pulled the jewel out and. No.
I mean, did everybody else go see the Endgame in the movie theater? Am I the only one?
I did.
Okay, so
I didn't.
So there were 2 things that were universal across all the screenings of Endgame from what I ever talked with people about. One was when Cap picked up Mjolnir, everybody went nuts and loved it.
Oh yeah.
And when Thanos knocked the crap out of Captain Marvel across the screen, everybody cheered in that one. And you're talking about the guy who just
standing ovation in my
for the villain of the entire Avengers saga was getting like applause and whoops and all sorts of screaming for getting rid of SJW haircut Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
So the question is, if he's trying to kill off all the male superheroes, like who's he trying to impress?
Well, he's in Hollywood. It's the same thing that happened to Kevin Smith. Okay, you get out there and you get so far up in your own ass.
Just an epic virtue signal.
You have to do it to like try to get, how else are you going to go to the dinner parties and be able to, be reinforced?
Well, I can tell you about a year ago, there was a power shift. There was a producer. I can't remember her name, but a producer that Kevin Feige put over Marvel Studios. Third wave feminist. And
isn't that it's a Latino name because her husband was the editor at Marvel Comics, right?
Yeah.
Why am I'm blanking on her name?
I can't remember her name, but anyway, she did reshoots on Black Widow to change Taskmaster into a woman, and she ordered those. And she also, you can tell in Falcon and Winter Soldier that Bucky was originally supposed to get the shield. That Falcon was going to turn the shield over to Bucky. You can tell because of the narrative. This was the Russos. The Russo script.
It's the Brubaker run too. That Russos were following the Brubaker run as closely as they could cinematically, and that's why it was great.
But in episode 3 was when the reshoots happened, and you can tell because in episode 3, Bucky got punked out by the Dora Milaje. They took Zemo and put him back in jail, and then they made suddenly the bad guy was suddenly supposed to be sympathetic, and just the episode before she blew all those people up, and then suddenly they're trying to make her sympathetic, and it all happened in one episode. You can tell where the reshoots happened, and it's amazing the shift. The only person they left alone was U.S. Agent, and he's the best thing about the back half of that series.
I would recommend anybody who has the time to go find the EFAP episode where Mahler and his guys go over the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series. I think it's like 8 hours long, but they do every single episode and explain why John Walker's plot is the only one that is actually good.
The only one.
Didn't they also explain that he's the only good guy?
Yeah, he's the only hero because he's the only one who actually makes a sacrifice. It comes up in the last episode after he's taken the serum, where he actually chooses to save the people and get no credit. Then Falcon comes in there and says, "Do better" to everybody else as he's lecturing.
Worst writing ever. Yeah, I don't know what you should do. I don't know what you should do. Just do it better.
I mean, yes. There's a thing about comic books should appeal the ideal audience you write for is maybe 12 to 14, because at that age range, kids underneath younger can enjoy it, and adults can still enjoy it. And your target demo is that range, right?
Yeah, because that age group developmentally is the one trying to figure out what's going on in the world, and you're showing it to them.
Yeah, but I'm going to throw out a Tropic Thunder thing. You never go full something, and they went full something because they didn't write for children. They wrote for special kids. Yes, you don't.
I said retard.
You don't go full retard. Yeah,
you don't go full retard.
They went. Let's do it this way. They simple jacked Falcon.
Yeah, they did.
And so that's what they did. They turned Falcon, who was supposed to be, if you watch the Russo's version of Falcon, highly trained, highly intelligent, sophisticated individual who was not like some bumbling guy, someone who wouldn't EFAP nailed this. There's plenty of times where Falcon murdered people indiscriminately in the first 5 or 6 episodes, and then when they get to John Walker and they show him kill a terrorist who had just participated in murdering in cold blood his best friend, who was also a minority.
Yep.
And he took out this terrorist who also had super soldier serum in his blood, who could have killed countless people. This guy should be getting another Medal of Honor for what he did. And instead, like EFAP said, they changed the music. They put the blood on the shield to be scary. And then they tell you through Bucky and Falcon that you're supposed to be upset about what he did because we're the good guys who've been around in the MCU, and so you need to not like him.
When you try to force it like this, either when we talked about, someone who's actually not being heroic, but you're making it so, or in this case, they actually do the heroism, but we're going to rewrite it just because. It kind of sounds like something that's almost become a trope on our show, the Zero's journey.
Yeah. I think there's also a weird thing with, they truly believe might makes right. So if you instill enough authority in the right characters, their actions are irrelevant because they have the authority to determine the morality.
Well, they also believe that your morality determines whether you're right or not. And if you're on the right side of history, if you have the right set of morals, then it doesn't matter what you do. You're justified in everything you possibly can do.
And according to them, they can just rewrite the history books later, so it doesn't fucking matter because they'll erase all the bad stuff they did.
Exactly. That's why Kyle Rittenhouse is vilified, and the guy in Waukesha is had a GoFundMe.
To be fair, I've read the news, and I understand that it was a Ford Escape that perpetrated that crime.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
That's why he feels dehumanized. They keep calling him a car.
Those damn SUVs.
I looked it up. It's Victoria Alonso, because Axel Alonso, I think, is her husband.
Victoria Alonso. That's it.
I'm just saying, there's no amendment for cars, so we need sensible car control immediately.
We do. We honestly
universal
do,
background checks before you buy a car.
So to dovetail on that,
and according to Alec Baldwin, we need to protect these self-shooting guns too.
I've never had a hammer just go off like that in my life, but I mean, who knows? Maybe
single
maybe,
action.
Look, I'm going to be honest. Maybe he was rocking a P320 that hadn't had its voluntary trigger upgrade, and those ones did have a tendency to go off. But that's whatever. I'm Sig Sauer fanboys.
Something still has to happen for it to go off.
Let's talk about the fact that even if it
there's
went off
never been a gun in history that while sitting on the table or just being somewhere randomly shot. It just will not happen.
The safest gun on the planet is a single action revolver.
Because it's got like 3 different points of I believe it's got 3 different locking points that the trigger has to release as you go through. Now in the old days, sometimes cowboys would modify them so they could do their quick pop pop pop, but you'd have to do some steps to fan it, fan fire. Right. And if they did that, there's some problems with doing that too. That's definitely not safe, and you shouldn't have been doing on the set. And you definitely shouldn't have said, "Okay, let me point the gun right at somebody as I'm doing this." Hey, you! Why don't you stand directly in the path of the firearm? Even regardless, I don't like when people do that.
That was a rule in Hollywood. Like even in the scenes where you see people shooting at each other, they're never supposed to sight in on each other.
That's correct.
They're supposed to
as a matter of fact.
That's basic gun safety.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, after The Crow and Brandon Lee got shot, there's all kinds of things that were put into place. This is the first shooting since Brandon Lee, the very first one. And the reason why is because they had this armorer who was hired because she was the daughter of somebody, and she was so unsafe that people were quitting the production in droves to get away from her. And that was the person that set the pistol up. But unfortunately, she's a lesbian. So,
well, she may be a member of the Film Actors Guild. I have it on high authority that Alec Baldwin is the president of the Film Actors Guild.
Really,
another great comedy. That was a great comedy.
He's always been trying to make sure that people live the lifestyle of the Film Actors Guild. To say thank you, Film Actors Guild. We want to live our Film Actors Guild lifestyle everywhere.
You're killing me. You're killing me right now.
And you know what?
Say it so bad.
I think this sets up an excellent transition now to go to one of the things we did want to cover tonight, which is about comedy. And certainly, yes, that wonderful Team America World Police film in which they opposed the Film Actors Guild. It was so funny. It was great.
Right.
And
don't try to outact me, boy. Don't even try.
I cannot act Alec Baldwin.
You can't upstage me.
You're breaking my balls, Han Bricks.
Yes. Well, the thing about it is, though, is when you see like something like Saturday Night Live pass this up and not even touch it, I mean,
it's
everything's gotten very one-sided. Like, anybody who's paying any attention can see that.
Oh gosh, yeah. But see, comedy. We're talking about comedy earlier. We're talking about how if you play something so ridiculous straight up and down, and you play it hard enough, it becomes parody. And son of a bitch, everything in mainstream right now is parody. It's complete parody.
I feel bad for the Babylon Bee sometimes because it's like their headlines aren't supposed to be real, and then within a matter of weeks, their headlines become real.
They are real.
Exactly.
Although when
they've actually been accused of being right-wing propaganda, and they're like, but we're parody site.
Exactly. Although when you mention that is one of the things we're looking at is this question of like how to do comedy, right?
Yeah.
And Babylon Bee is a great example of utilizing the uncanny valley, right? People normally use that with horror when they say like artwork is not good because of the uncanny valley. It's because there's like obviously cartoony, there's realistic, and then there's that space where it's like just in between where it's not quite right. And when you see that, either you're going to laugh at it or you're going to cringe at it.
Yeah.
Right. In Babylon Bee's case, they're like, we're going to get so close to the truth, but 1 degree off that like you have to stop and think about it. And you're right. Like that's their whole shtick, and it works very well.
Oh, yeah. But see, people don't have a sense of humor on one side of the political divide anymore, and because they're all so serious. But you watch one of my favorite guys to watch is Zeducation, Tyler Zed. If you ever get a chance to watch him, but he does like the memes. He does memes, and you watch these memes that come through, and meme culture is so right-centered right now because you see the left, when the left try to meme, it's not funny. It's like
the left can't meme.
They can't. They cannot meme. I mean, there was like one that I saw that had like paragraph of text on it, right? But the thing about it is though is you have to understand.
It's a Brian Michael Bendis meme. Did he make it? Is that what happened?
Yeah, it might as well be.
That's right.
But like we were like I was telling him, there is a formula to comedy. There's a formula, and you have to understand what the joke is before you can make the joke. And
I also think you can't do comedy if you take yourself too seriously. Like, you have to be willing to be able to laugh at yourself. You have to be a part of the joke in order for the comedy to really land. And they can't do that.
They can't do that because they're on the right side of the history. They're these warriors for justice. They're protecting the world. They're changing everything.
I've known a lot of warriors in my day, and they ain't it.
No, they're not. No, they're not. But see, you have to know what the joke is. You have to know who the joke is on, and you have to know who the instigator is. And then basically all the humor comes from the straight guy.
Yeah.
All the humor will come from the straight guy's reaction to what happened.
I was going to say, and you really schooled me on that the other day. We were talking.
Yeah.
And so explain to us, the instigator and the straight guy.
Okay. Straight guy, all the comedy will come from the straight guy, okay? The straight guy's the fulcrum, that which the whole thing will turn, okay? Instigator is like the guy that pushes it around, okay? That's where all the energy's coming from. And instigator is not necessarily the funniest thing about the joke, but
he
the
just
instigator
gets it going.
He gets it going,
this
right?
sounds very Monty Python's Flying Circus. Like, this sounds like their formula.
Yeah. It's exactly their formula. I mean, they got it right.
It goes back further than that. You got Martin and Lewis when you had the straight man, and I mean,
Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy.
I mean, if you want to use a more modern example that people know of, you could go with movie Central Intelligence with The Rock and Kevin Hart, or any of the Jumanji movies with The Rock and Kevin Hart.
Right.
You're getting your straight man character, and you're getting the reaction. And the comedy is generally coming from the reaction from the person who's not, you have I guess one way to say it is you have an absurdist and a realist, and the reaction from the realist to the absurdist is where the comedy usually comes in.
Well, you got somebody like Bob Newhart, though, who was the straight man and the instigator. But most of the time, Bob Newhart worked best as the straight man. But he was hilarious. He's the funniest person usually. But he never really instigated anything. He was like the victim of everything. But then his reactions to it. I mean, Larry, Darryl, and Daryl in the Newhart
My brother Daryl, my other brother Daryl.
Exactly. But they would do something totally ridiculous, and all he would do is just sit there, kind of blink, and then say, okay, well, let me get this straight, and then he'd repeat it back. You have to understand what the joke is, and you understand why it's funny before you can make the joke.
Can I take a moment to appreciate how awesome the series finale for that one was? So Newhart had a previous television show in the 70s that was very well received, very popular. And then he did his
with
new
Suzanne
one
Pleshette.
with Suzanne Pleshette. So the very series finale of his new one was him waking up in bed with Suzanne Pleshette and talking to her about this crazy dream he had and how ridiculous it was. And the entire show, it was mocking, how they would do that, saying Elsewhere it was supposed to all be a dream, or in Dallas where, you wake up and then he's in the shower and it was all a dream. So the Newhart, being as smart as he was, I can take advantage of my previous really popular show, and I'm going to make a series finale ending that people will actually just get a kick out of forever.
Right.
It makes me laugh just thinking about it.
It's perfect. It was perfect. But the whole show, his wife, it was her idea. And she's like, this show is it's so crazy that what if you just woke up and it turned out that it was Bob Newhart from the original show and this is just a dream? And he's like, well, that's crazy. And then he's like, That's a good idea. So they actually filmed it. The original bedroom, they had a very distinctive bedroom, and they recreated the set of the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And so, but he understood what the joke is, and he understood why it would be funny, And it's best ending to a show ever. I mean, it's always number one if you ever watch that and MASH,
Another great classic.
But
I just
yeah,
the MASH one bothered me because
I don't know that I've ever seen the ending.
So for MASH, the ending went completely out of character. You had Alan Alda murder a child. It was completely.
Well, he didn't murder the child. The woman murdered the child on his behalf, basically.
It was still like, it was just wrong. Because you gotta, I think when you come up with an ending for a show, you want it to fit tonally what your show's core is. So Newhart, even though it was going and throwing back to his original TV show from the 70s with Suzanne Plachette, it fit the tone and spirit of his new show perfect.
Right, exactly.
Whereas with MASH, you had like occasionally they would do serious stuff and that was it, but it was a long running, very popular parody, making fun. And obviously it evolved into kind of a mocking of Vietnam by way of Korea. And then I think because they wanted to try to make some points about what was going on current year with Vietnam and some of the other things politically, they wanted to use, Hawkeye. Was it Hawkeye, right?
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye. Alan Alda as the way to get that message about how, even the good soldiers that you liked were doing these terrible things.
Right.
And it just, I mean, it was before my time, but I only watched it in reruns.
Yeah.
And, to me, the way to do it right would be something like what Cheers did, where it was just a simple finish. Sam Malone, Ted Danson at the bar. Someone's trying to get in and he just yells, "We're closed." And it was nice.
Sorry, we're closed.
Yeah, sorry, we're closed. It didn't try to do too much. It fit what you were doing and it kind of went with it.
When you talk about the problem with writing comedy and the real challenge with writing comedy is essentially an organic thing, and it's almost chaotic in a way because comedy, especially situational comedy, but comedy is such a nebulous thing, and it changes with whoever hears it, right? And to find a way to make that universal is the real challenge. And basically, when you write, you are taking something from chaos into something concrete, something that can be replicable, right? And so the challenge is when you write comedy is you have to find a way to take something that's organic, something that is kind of nebulous, and find a way to make it concrete enough that people can read it and get the joke. And that's a tall order. It really is.
Yep. And
I don't think it's anything gross.
Yeah, and especially in the context, because I know a lot of us are comics guys, what can also happen as well is you can have an idea, and sometimes like that idea entirely in isolation looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? Or you can have an idea and it's really funny to you because you get all the context, all these other little clues because it's all in your head. But then you put that on paper, put it in front of somebody, they've got no idea what you were trying to say.
Right. Well, I like to watch these behind the scenes documentaries, and they're talking about SNL and how SNL was a snake pit, and it was a horrible place to work, and it just chewed people up and spit them out. Because people would do these pitch meetings, and then people would like, oh, well, that joke doesn't ever work, and then they'd pitch the joke and get it on the air. But the thing about it is there's a universality to if it makes you laugh, then it'll make somebody else laugh. Basically, you know if something's funny or not, right?
If you could just distill out why did it make you laugh?
Why did it make you laugh, right? And what's the joke? Why is it funny?
Do you think that a part of it? I do think that when you write the joke and you're trying to be funny, you need to not have fear of your perspective. Like the best comedians don't shape their comedy to your worldview. They make the comedy based on their worldview and take you along with it, like George Carlin or Eddie Murphy at his peak.
Right.
Dave Chappelle. He's really knocking it out.
Dave Chappelle right now.
Yep.
Yeah, they're not just like trying to be what Big Bang Theory was with canned laughter and doing the lowest common denominator. They're coming with their edge and their perspective.
Yeah.
And then making the comedy from that. And then because comedy is universal when done right, that's, I think one of the things they used to talk about is how comedians were, kind of truth tellers. And then, because comedy at its core, when it makes people laugh across the spectrum, is because there's universal truth to it.
Right.
Something authentic. And it doesn't have to be your experience to, have a genuine appreciation for the authenticity and find it funny.
Exactly.
And I think one of the reasons comedy is going so downhill, at least on a mainstream like movie and television basis, is because they're all scared so shitless of having any kind of perspective. Like, look what happens to Dave Chappelle when he comes out there and actually just makes jokes. They try to end his career. They try to keep him from donating to charities. They try to do everything.
Right.
Do you think, like, I think of Richard Pryor and I'm like, what would have happened to him today? Like, this man, like Richard Pryor, if you go back and listen, made a comedy bit about how he lit himself on fire trying to freebase drugs.
Yeah.
And and joked about it. And
Richard Pryor wrote Blazing Saddles, and he wrote it for himself. And I've seen people try to call that movie racist, and I'm like, Richard Pryor wrote the damn movie. He just wasn't popular enough at that time. But I just, it kills me that we'll never know what he would have been in that movie because he's so good,
Yes, I think one of the more underrated comedy movies I've ever seen, and I don't know why nobody gave it a chance when it came out, was Harlem Nights, because it had Richard Pryor, it had Eddie Murphy, it had Arsenio, like everybody, like Red Fox was in it, they were all in this movie, all the comedians from the 70s, and it didn't make money at the box office, but it's hilariously funny. Anybody who can find it should go watch it. It's underrated. It was probably, I think, one of my favorite. It came out right around, I think it was right after Coming to America. So
it's Eddie Murphy.
It was Eddie Murphy using his peak powers to make a movie he'd always wanted to make. So he got Richard Pryor and it got all these guys in it, and I think it's hilarious and underrated, but I'm also a guy who enjoys Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon, and people tell me that's not great when it is. I'll fight me on that one. But
sure enough,
that's right, the Shogun of Harlem.
Well, there you go.
Bruce Leroy can catch bullets with his teeth.
Well, it's. You talk about humor, like Norm Macdonald was, like, for me, one of the best that's ever lived. But his last set in Letterman, and just the observational humor, let me just go ahead and tell this one. When he's talking about, people are concerned about North Korea, and he's like, I've never been concerned about North Korea. I never wake in the middle of the night and say, oh, North Korea, oh my God, North Korea. He's like, no, there's this other country that concerns me. This little country, I don't know if you know your history, but this little country is called Germany.
There you go.
He said when Germany went to war, you know who they went to war with? They went to war with the world. And he says, and it was close. In 15 minutes, they went to war again. And they went to war against, once again, the world. Well, it's a simple joke, but it's like, you never think of it that way, but it's just the way of looking at the world, And
when we talked earlier about comedy being something that's true, and also when I talked about the Uncanny Valley, this gave me a thought as well. Sometimes the Uncanny Valley is not in the comedian making that small distortion on the truth, but it's actually the Uncanny Valley is inside of yourself. And that's a great example in which everyone's like, oh, like, we're so concerned about, this current year thing, that current year thing. And then the guy suddenly just grabs you, takes you somewhere totally sideways. And then you're suddenly like, wow, like, I am being stupid. And then you can laugh at yourself.
Exactly.
I think that there's another point. Like, the reason people in power are so sensitive and try to regulate comedy so much is because it is so truthful. And so when they see people laughing at their expense, they know that they're laughing because there's an element of truth to what is making them laugh. And there's, in human nature, it's hard for people, even people who say they have no sense of humor or don't laugh at things, they kind of know it's funny. They know it's actually funny. And
sometimes the emperor, somebody needs to say that the emperor has no clothes. And when the emperor is walking around naked, they don't want anybody saying that the emperor has no clothes. And that's what comedy does. Comedy points these things out.
And it shows a level of insecurity, too, if you can't be the butt of the joke with any kind of grace. Like, just be okay with it. And one, it'll probably be over a lot sooner.
Right, exactly.
Two, the only thing you're signaling to anyone when you get upset about these jokes is that they're right.
Right. They hit a nerve. Right.
They're right, and you're not willing to own it, and you're not willing to change.
Exactly. Well, and the big elephant in the room about comedy is that comedy is a very serious thing. Comedy is like the release valve. It's like the pressure valve on society. If we can't laugh, if we can't laugh at the absurdity, if we can't point out the absurdity, and if we can't find some levity, it's somewhere, then society is going to just crack. And every time that comedy has been suppressed, every time people have gone after comedy, then society has had a serious breakdown very shortly after.
And I think at the opposite end of the spectrum there is rage. And so if you don't have one to counterbalance the other, we'll all be at each other's throats before long.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to come out one way or another.
If you don't have the pressure relief valve, the boiler's going to explode.
Exactly.
All work and play makes Jack a dull boy.
Makes Jack a very dull boy, and suddenly Jack is swinging a baseball bat at his wife.
That's true.
All work and no play makes Jack a serial killer. Is what really happens.
Makes Jack a very scary guy.
To be fair, the bartender was merely pointing out that his wife and son needed to be corrected. They needed to. So no, that was terrible. I don't. The Shining is a great example, I think, of what happens when you. It's weird to say as an example of comedy, but when you guess what, they weren't laughing ever.
No.
And when you're taking away something, it's a case study. And if you take the joy and the reliefs and all the stuff that can help people, not have a focus on things that are driving them crazy. I mean, I know that Stephen King didn't really like The Shining film as an example of his book because it was very different. But I think what he was trying to do when he made the movie was to go into explore what happens when someone is isolated and it's a good case study on isolation and the extremes. And Stanley Kubrick, you can see the way he frames it because he does wide open spaces where it highlights the isolation of the individual in that hotel. It's like big sweeping hallways, big open floors, and that one person by themselves. He's in the ballroom.
Claustrophobic,
exactly, because isolation and lack of social interaction, lack of joy, leads to taking a axe and saying, "Here's Johnny." Like he was trying to get comedy back. That's all he was doing.
Right.
And also let's be real honest.
He was being funny, right?
Let's be real honest about Stephen King. He doesn't like anything.
No, he doesn't.
So the only Stephen King product that I just have true, genuine love for was Maximum Overdrive, because he was so coked out of his mind when he made that movie.
We made this observation though. We were talking about that, and I was mentioning that. Boy, that was a lot of cocaine when he did that. But he was talking about that he didn't remember Cujo. He can't remember that he even wrote Cujo, And when they came to do the intervention, he actually asked them for 24 hours to think about it. And one of my guys is from Canada, is appropriated comedy or some comics or something. AP, we call him AP, and he's like, "Boy, that was some good cocaine."
There you go.
He's like, your family's sitting there like, we don't want to watch you kill yourself. And he's like, well, give me 24 hours. It's like, man, what was the quality of that cocaine, man?
Basically, he's like, I've got enough left for one last bender. I want to just go out. I'm going to go out epic, and then I'm going to go. But because he's going to go Scarface style and just be face down on the desk.
Exactly.
Do it.
Absolutely.
Did you ever see Maximum Overdrive, Mike?
No, I can't say that I have.
So let me explain the concept to you, and you'll see how crazy this is. A comet passes by the Earth, and the radiation given off by the comet brings to life every electronic device on the planet circa 1986.
Oh, I remember this movie.
Okay.
So we follow a group of survivors in a diner because it was a truck stop diner. It stars Emilio Estevez, by the way, and the voice of Lisa Simpson, which once
Yeardley Smith.
Yeardley Smith.
Yep.
Who every time she talks, you can't take her seriously because it's just Lisa Simpson talking.
It's Lisa Simpson, yeah.
But they get this truck stop. The trucks come to life, and one of the trucks has a giant green goblin head on it. And they're just circling the diner, getting ready to murder these people.
It's based off a short story called Trucks.
Yeah.
And the short story is about 2 or 3 pages long, and he tried to make a 2-hour movie off of this short story.
And, like, the opening sequence of the movie, you have like vending machines shooting sodas at people to kill them. You have lawnmowers coming to life and mowing people down. You have toasters like electrocuting people. And
I'm just thinking
so
about
absurd.
like the committee where they're thinking of like what kind of scenes we're going to do to storyboard this.
Oh my God, no! Stephen King directed it.
Yeah, he directed it. He directed the damn thing. Yeah.
And there was one quote where Stephen King, they asked him, why was Maximum Overdrive so bad? And he's like, I was coked out of my mind. And he's like, why do people think it's so good? And he's like, because I was coked out of my mind.
I still remember the lawnmower thing scared the shit out of me. Like I was extra careful with lawnmowers after that.
I remember I was watching it at like 7 years old, and I thought it was hilarious. Maybe because it's so absurd. Like going back to the rules of comedy, it's so absurdist, and you've got these people reacting in a straight way. It's just comedy. Like if they had, they should. I in my heart, I think in a subconscious, Stephen King must have been making it as a comedy.
Yeah,
because it is a perfect example of like absurdity with the straight response to it, and just how you laugh when you see it.
Well, and that's why so many horror franchises of the 80s eventually became comedies. Like Freddy Krueger is absurd, but he's also hilarious, especially in the later movies. Same with Jason.
I'm thinking
Tremors,
of Dream Warriors.
Just got funnier and funnier.
Dream Warriors comes to mind for Freddy Krueger.
Yep.
Oh, Tremors.
Well, we're talking about how you push it. If you push it far enough, it becomes parody. There's like a thin line between being if your material, your premise is so ridiculous and you try to play it straight up and down, it becomes parody.
I think the best example for that in a slasher franchise is Friday the 13th. Because it tries to maintain seriousness through probably the first 7 movies.
I'd say 5.
So they start in like 6 and 7 is where they start working in psychics, and that's where it starts getting a little weird.
That was 7, yeah.
That was 7.
Psychic, yeah.
And then by 8, which was Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yeah.
That already tells you right there,
right? Which is then it's like you're getting into it, but I mean, where it really just goes full parody is with Jason X, which was the one they did right before. It was so bad that
they wanted his machete back.
He just wanted his machete back. But there's a lot, and it makes me laugh every time I see the clip. There's like he's supposed to be in the far future, and they thaw out Jason Voorhees, and because he's never dies, and they figured that out, so they just froze him. But they found him on the wastelands of Earth, and they let him out. He gets onto the super sophisticated spaceship, and they put him in the equivalent of a holodeck, and they want to distract him, so they know they looked up his case history, so they put on like buxom co-eds, like just running around so he can try to kill him. And they run up to Jason, and because it's parody, they're like, do you want to have premarital sex and do drugs? We just love doing premarital sex and drugs. And so Jason just takes the machete and is like cleaving them, but they won't die, and it's frustrating the hell out of him.
I want to see a crossover with Jason versus Snake Plissken. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, Jason versus Freddy, I love that movie.
I did too. I thought it was hysterical.
That was another one where they leaned into the humor, and it worked well because it was the people in it were taking it seriously, but the plot was definitely designed to make you laugh. Like it was it's true with Freddy, like you mentioned, he became a one-line machine, and it was that's how you do it. And then you put him in. What was interesting, it's like an Abbott and Costello with Freddy and Jason. You've got the straight man and Jason, who's like literally the silent like straight man, to
That's
Freddy
right.
Krueger's absurdist comedian, and you've almost got a Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis vibe in what they were doing with that.
Right, exactly. But that's the thing, though. You always in every single structure, you'll find straight man, you'll find an instigator, you'll find the joke, you'll find why it's funny, and then all the comedy comes from the straight man. I mean, it's a very very distinct formula
because it's
you
the
pretty
case
much
of
find
you
everywhere.
expect them to react one way, and then that's where you drop in your twist.
Exactly. And so there. I mean, there is. You ever see the movie Aristocrats? The Aristocrats. It's not the Aristocats, but the Aristocrats.
No, where they're talking about, it's the famous thing where the comedians will try to make the most dirty, most horrible version of this joke.
Just one joke, and it's a bad joke.
If I remember right, it's about a family auditioning for an event, and so that's what the terrible versions of it is because it's a family auditioning for a vaudeville thing, and the punchline is always the same. So the way it works is the comedians have from the middle to be as horrible and disgusting and the worst possible take on it imaginable. The punchline is, what's the name of the act? The Aristocrats.
Yeah.
But it's like, and in between the comedians fill in like, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's horrible. Like everything, like, you could imagine as like the worst vaudeville family act you could. Right. And then the punchline being the absurd thing is the Aristocrats is the play on words because they're not fancy. It's the exact opposite. And it's all
the comedians like tell this their variation on it, right? And they would like tell it to each other, but then they tried to like do it in a way that was very distinctive to them. But the joke's really not funny. I mean, it's really not funny. It's a very dated joke. But the comedy comes in the telling of it and the style and the way they tell it. But
I think the goal was for each comedian to try to, because it was always told in like the green room where all the comedians were hanging out before their shows.
Right.
So the goal is to make other comedians laugh because they're the most jaded audience you can get, right? They're aware of timing rules, they're aware of comedy rules, and they've all heard this joke already. They already all know it. So that's why it's like the standing challenge of the room is, can you take a joke we already know the rules to, that we already know the punchline to, and make us laugh with it?
Exactly. But that's part of it, because comedy, you look at these comedians, man, and they'll have favorites that nobody knows. They'll have like people that they like laud or just in awe of, and nobody seems to know who they are, and they're like, because they never really worked the big rooms because they were respected by the comedians, but they never really transitioned to being big. I mean, you got people like what is his name? The guy from Canada that told the little one-liners.
There's so many Canadian comedians.
I'm serious, guys. So much comedy comes out of.
I mean,
he's the guy that would tell.
What era was he?
He was 90s. Early 2000s. Mitch Hedberg.
Mitch Hedberg.
Oh, I loved Mitch Hedberg.
But people were just in awe of him. But when you look at it, his setups, his jokes were like, it was joke, setup, or setup, joke, setup, joke, setup, joke. And he would do like 30 jokes in the same amount of time it took somebody to do like 5, And there was just like absurd jokes, Like, I was playing my music loud one night, and then somebody started banging on the wall. And so I say, hey, go around. Just stupid stuff like that.
I always liked he had one where he was like, I want to live in a house with a brick wall and then get brick wallpaper to put on the wall. So the people look at it and they say, well, it looks fake, but it feels real. And I was like, that's not funny, but the fact that it's not funny is why it's hilarious.
Well, yeah, or the one where he's like, it's like, so I go to get a donut and they hand me a receipt. I'm like, why are you handing me a receipt? It's a donut. And they're like, well, he said, why are we bringing the government into this transaction? He says, He says, it's like, you hand me the donut, I hand you the money. End of transaction. It's just funny observational humor, but it was like these little bon mots of observation, but yeah, but that's the thing. If you just want to watch like pure comedy and what pure comedy is, you see somebody like Mitch Hedberg. He's just so clever, and he would tell the same story or the same jokes over and over and get just as big laughs because they never stop being funny. But this just all has to do with the formula. I mean, set up, joke, set up, joke, set up, joke.
There's another one where he was I stayed at the DoubleTree Hotel last night. I wonder how the meeting to name that place went. 1 tree, no, 2 trees, we're done. Damn. I was hoping for quadruple tree, and we were halfway there.
I hadn't heard that one. I hadn't heard that one.
But I mean, but the joke makes sense though, because the name is silly. So let's just play on the silliness.
Well, yeah. He's like, well, I went. He says, I went and got me a bed, and king size bed. He says, so if ever have a royal personage visit me, I say, hey, I've got the bed for you. He says, but when I was growing up, I had a twin bed, and I used to lay in it at night wondering where my brother was.
Speaking of comedians, do you guys remember Jeff Foxworthy?
Yeah,
he's not dead.
Yeah, good. Because it's just he went to the same school I did, and it was a case like he just started joking with his coworkers and like, dude.
Yeah, right. No. Yeah, you might be a redneck. Yeah.
I was gonna say, as we're talking about this, I still just remember one of his skits. It's like, if you've got 12 cars in your front yard and only one of them drives, you might be a redneck.
If your mother ever walked you to school because you're in the same class, you might be a redneck.
In the 90s, I used to love watching Comedy Central because they didn't have a lot of content. So they basically licensed a lot of stuff from England, like old, Benny Hill and a lot of those other shows.
Yeah.
But they also had constant streams of like just stand-up sets that they were recording like from these, and you could see so many comedians that
Oh, I remember. Yeah,
and it was fantastic. Spotlight. Yeah, it was fantastic. They'd be out there doing their 5-10 minute sets, and it would rotate, like the different people. And I remember I saw Zach Galifianakis before he became like an actor when he was doing his stand-up sets.
Oh, really?
And he was on Comedy Central. He used to do the bit where he was playing the piano like he was like a lounge singer and would just be making like hilarious.
Oh, those were fantastic.
And it was great.
Yeah, that was like a sketch show, wasn't it? Yeah, Zach Galifianakis.
Maybe I feel like I saw it as an actual like stand-up bit, but maybe all those shows blended together. Yeah. It was like Upright Citizens Brigade had their own show. I mean, there was all sorts of the State.
You remember the State?
Oh, that one was on MTV, I think, right? Was that the one with like MTV, that was the one with like Ken Marino and a lot of those other guys, the ones who ended up like so the State was the guys who did
Thomas Lennon.
They did what's the one
Reno 911.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I just remember there was one comedy bit. It was supposed to be an Italian family, and because I'm Italian, it stuck with my head. It was they were at like a family dinner, and it was talking about meatballs and like the different sauces. And the family members would be like, I want to dip my balls in it.
There was this one guy who was like his catchphrase. They were making fun of somebody with a catchphrase.
Yeah, and he said it like every time. He's like, no, I want to dip my balls in it. And then the grandmother came in, and it was the guy from Reno 911 wearing the wig being the grandmother. And like, what is it, Grandma? And she's like, I want to dip my balls in it.
Oh, they did the same thing at the Last Supper, and they're like, oh man, it's like, hey, here's some matzo soup. I want to dip my balls in it, and then they like followed him out there instead of Jesus, and then the Roman soldiers came and it's like, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. It's like he went that way. He's talking about his balls or something. I don't know.
I also remember on HBO, Mr. Show with I think Bob and like with Bob Odenkirk. Yeah, and that one has some of the like definitely stuff they won't put on TV now, like super offensive. Like my favorite one that I remember was a bit where it was guys pitching a new ad campaign for a company, and it was supposed to be at a fast food restaurant, And they were like taking the camera across, and the families were like, man, with the price of fucking meat going through the roof, we have to do it. And every person was dropping the F-bombs, and they cut back to the like boardroom after the commercial, and they're like, why would you do that? And it's like, people have to be offended. And then one of the board member women was like saying something, and he's like, look, do I go to where you work and slap the dick out of your mouth? No. So listen to what we tell you. And I was like, oh my God. And then it turns out like the absurdist punchline at the end was like the CEO of the business was like, no, we're a simple company. We started a few hundred years ago trading things across the Atlantic with a simple motto: people selling people to people. And it was like, oh no. It was just like talking about the like it was like each like level was absurdist and then got leveled up by the next absurd thing, like doing it. And it's a good example of the rules of comedy. Right. And it makes
it, it's like, are they laugh. Really going to go there? Right. Like,
and they did.
Are they really going to go there? And then they do. And you're like, I can't believe it.
Because it was 1997 or 98 and comedians were allowed to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
If they were allowed to do comedy. It was weird. It was strange times.
Think of like Men in Black 2. It was like it was a random pop movie, right? There's the part in it where they use the neuralizer, and it's from I think the guy from Mr. Show, and they're telling him like you live with your mother. Is like, get with your girlfriend, take her on a nice trip, and do something. And when they leave, the guy's like, the mom starts calling, he picks up the shovel to go murder her. That was like what, like, and it was like, he's like, come on, mom, we're gonna get rid of mom. And like it was like, that's the kind of thing they could never put in, but it's such a little detail that when you pick up on it, it's like, whoa, that's really messed up but funny. And that was in Men in Black too.
I think somebody said that comedians are the canaries in the coal mine of culture. If the comedians stop being funny, then you know you're in deep shit.
I think it's a bad sign that the new generation of comedian is apparently represented by Hannah Gadsby. And that's like their best they can do.
No, she's not a comedian, so
and Sarah Silverman
is. Exactly.
Sarah
Silverman used to be funny. Like,
I never found her remotely funny, but that's.
I didn't like the really raunchy humor doesn't resonate with me either. But I mean, women aren't funny, so like, that's the closest we had.
Sarah Silverman was always trying to be like the shock jock of comedian. She was purposely trying to do edgelord stuff.
Yeah,
like the kind of thing you saw on Twitter in 2010 from everybody who wanted to be an edgelord. Was what Sarah Silverman was doing in her comedy to get attention.
Right. Didn't hesitate to pull that ladder up behind her, though, did she?
No, she didn't. Just like Amy Schumer. The first time I ever heard of Amy Schumer was listening to her on the ONA satellite radio show, which used to be the best radio show in the world for comedians. Like, they would bring comedians on and just let them hang out, and it would be hilarious. Patrice O'Neill.
Oh, God.
Patrice. He was amazing. They had Bill Burr on there. They had,
Ralphie May.
I mean, Joe Rogan basically said he got the idea for his podcast from the way the O&A show used to be. And Amy Schumer was funny. Like, she got on there. She was authentic. She was just being like a normal, funny self. And she used that. She started parlaying that into getting the Amy Schumer show, getting some specials. And as soon as, talking about pulling the ladder up, from behind you, as soon as she got that mainstream credibility and stuff, it was like a big double barrel, like flipping them off and saying like, I regret ever having been on those shows. Those guys were misogynist, and it was like, oh my God, you were only having a career because you got to be on with like Patrice O'Neill and all these other guys with Colin Colin Quinn. And it's if they're on YouTube, I think the old stuff, and you can go pull up some of the stuff, like especially Patrice O'Neill's bits. Like, he's probably one of the best comedians, and unfortunately, and I forget whether it was Jim Norton or one of the other guys who said like Patrice O'Neill, if they were making a joke like Patrice O'Neill was always trying to fight his demons, it was always blowing up his career. Who knew that it would that it would be the like Taco Bell that finally was the thing that derailed his career permanently, because he was he was a really big guy, had diabetes and other things, but man, his comedy was so epically hilarious.
Oh yeah, Ralphie May too. Ralphie May also.
Mhm.
If you the best comedy set I think I've ever seen is Just Correct. If you just look up Just Correct, because he went after everybody. He's like, I'm 600 fucking pounds. What are you gonna do to me? What are you gonna do to me? And he just went after everybody.
That's right, dude.
He's fearless. Anyway, I gotta go to work in about a half an hour here, so I will appreciate you guys inviting me on. Hope I didn't mess your show up too bad.
I don't know. I had a great time.
Okay.
Same.
All right.
I don't know, man.
mean,
I think it's all over because we'll just never top this one.
I think we'll have him back on, and it'll be even more hilarious. We're gonna. I mean,
It's gonna be
Mike,
it's
you're
gonna
being
be
so
a chain
pessimistic.
reaction.
And we'll call the episode "The Aristocrat."
All right.
Yeah, just tap your fingers.
That's right, dude. This is a great time. I'm telling you, dude, my list of stuff I need to go study to like actually go get culture just keeps getting longer every time.
Well, a comedy of errors. I mean, hey, we've indemnified ourselves just by the title.
That's right. That's right. And now looking forward to it. And with that, yeah, I have to say it was a good time. And guess we'll talk next week.
Bye, everybody.
All right, see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks.